Happy New Year and a warm welcome to you on the Gavel. I'm Linda Akibi. The National Assembly is resuming from its holiday on January 18th, and there is a lot to expect from federal lawmakers in 2022. One of the major expectations from the National Assembly this year is the conclusion of the issues relating to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. President Buhari returned the bill to the National Assembly in December 2021, noting concerns over the amendment of the method of party primaries. Now, many Nigerians are anticipating that this issue is resolved quickly so the country can have a new electoral law, which is expected to resolve the problems confronting the elections in the country. Now, another outlook for 2022 is the amendment of the 1999 Constitution. The committees are projected to lay the report before both houses for consideration. Now, there's a need to quickly conclude this process before the expiration of the present administration. So what do you expect from the National Assembly this year? We will appreciate if you send us a mail with your thoughts. Now, in this report, two legislative experts tell us the highs and lows of the National Assembly in 2021 and what they expect from Parliament in 2022. 2021 was an eventful year in the National Assembly, characterized by the passage of two major legislations, the Petroleum Industry Bill and the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. But besides the enactment of these bills, two legislative experts speak on the high and low points of a National Assembly in 2021.
There were highs and lows. The National Assembly, the Ninth Assembly in 2021 was able to deliver on, I think, two of its promises to Nigerians, even though some of them came late, but better late than never. The passage of the age-long Petroleum Industry and Governance Bill should be considered as a high and a landmark legislation that the Ninth National Assembly will be remembered for. The amendments of, after so many delays, so much delays, the amendments of the 2010 Electoral Act, the passage of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill can equally be considered as one of the legacy legislations that this Ninth Assembly will be bequeathing to the Nigerian electoral and democratic process. Again, is to consider the passage, the early passage of the appropriation bills, but then again in the area of representation, really. You may not say the Ninth Assembly has done so much. In the area of oversight, you wouldn't really also say that the Ninth National Assembly has done much. Now, if you take representation, for instance, Nigerians have an opinion about this Ninth National Assembly, that it is an assembly that is not living up to the wishes and the aspirations of Nigerians. And I think the Ninth National Assembly got this message, and it informed the reversal of the Senate's position on the electronic transmission of results. And the Senate had to come back, listen to the voices of the people, and reversed itself. So that way you can say, okay, perhaps the Ninth Senate is beginning to listen to the people. But again, Nigerians have this impression that the Ninth Assembly is dancing to the dictates of the executive. Nigerians are not asking the Ninth Assembly, to take up arms against the executive, but Nigerians are asking that the legislature should be able to hold the executive to account for its, for its actions and for the policies and programs, that the executive dish out.
In lawmaking, this Ninth Assembly have had to make a lot of establishment bills have been passed without assent, and there's no consequences. No noise about even to override important legislation. NDDC probe started in the National Assembly, and the presidency took it over because there is a gap in Section 88, where they are merely giving to back and not to bite. And these are things that, so in oversight, we have not seen, any major significant, with all that is happening in the country. There were over investigative hearing on Chinese loan and all that, which was shut down, and I thought that that was a suspension of democracy, in the House of Representatives. Many bills not signed, no discussions, about no consequences, for that, except, representation effort that is going on, because you have to assess them based on the mandate they have. So in lawmaking, in oversight, in constituency representation, these two, lawmaking and oversight, we could see that we have not had any major significant, outcome that brings confidence to the people. And it can be achieved. It can be achieved because both the leadership of the National Assembly and the executive enjoys relationship. And in fact, significantly, they even established a platform to interface with each other.
The National Assembly will be resuming plenary on January 18, and these legislative experts set the agenda for them for 2022.
Well, as we march into 2022, of course, it is the political season, and so not much will be expected from the 9th National Assembly. It will, so in the executive, you will say the president has become a lame duck executive, and so the legislature also will be, most members will be fighting for their own political survival, and so not much is expected from the 9th Assembly as far as 2022 is concerned. But importantly, we would expect them to wrap up the processes of amending the 1999 Constitution. Secondly, we would expect that they pick up the issues around the public health emergency bill that was introduced in the heydays of the COVID-19 pandemic, the control of infectious diseases bill in the House, the public health emergency bill in the Senate. Now, nobody hears anything again about these bills, and they are bills that are targeted at amending a very old piece of legislation in the country. And so we would expect that the National Assembly would again go back and conclude the processes of amending that bill. We would also expect that the 9th Assembly in 2022 should be more assertive as far as oversight functions are concerned and representing the interests of the people are concerned. Again, we would expect that legislations and requests coming from the executive should be better scrutinized by the 9th National Assembly as we march into 2022.
I want to see that government money works for the people, that the budget is seen to be working. Somebody said the people no longer know when budget is presented or passed. That people are not even interested in the content of the budget anymore. And that government budget is a national development policy that provides direction on how resources are allocated and the priority of government to benefit the people, whether rural or urban community. Now, when the people are disconnected from the content of your budget, then we have a problem. And the National Assembly has a role in strengthening its oversight functions to ensure that agencies of government effectively deploy government resources. Monies are released. It doesn't make sense for budget to continue to increase, triple, in figures every fiscal year. And then we don't have the result on ground. We talk about deficit financing, no problem. You can have deficit financing, you can borrow to finance your deficit, but can we go on ground? The idea of saying budget will perform 60% using release of money without talking about cash back, without talking about project on ground, and the National Assembly does not have the resources to embark on nationwide oversight that can check things on ground against the funds that have been released by Accountant General and others. So, and the report from the Public Accounts Committee, what have we been doing with that report? We have advocated that beyond laying that report, we should start quarterly legislative debate on the outcome of the work of public account, because that is the watchdog of the entire country. Everybody submits report there, including Auditor General of the Federation. So beyond their coming to submit their report, we want to see quarterly debate on major oversight outcome so that it can generate national interest and raise the consciousness of the people and get the people involved in political process. So for me, I want to see them strengthen their oversight and get our budget work more. I want to see them make sure that the Electoral Act is assented to, or the president, the veto power of the president, they must gather the momentum to override that. And I want to see this constitutional amendment make progress. And beyond the National Assembly, the presidency and the president himself must know that I don't think any president, from President Obasanjo to now, have enjoyed the kind of cooperation and support this president enjoys with the National Assembly. He must bequeath a legacy of hope that can give Nigerians hope in their country.
The National Assembly passed the Petroleum Industry Bill and the Electoral Act Amendment Bill in 2021. But there were some other critical legislations also passed by Parliament in the year.
Let me commend our committees.
President Ahmad Lawan giving the highlights of the achievements of the Senate in 2021. He goes on to mention some legislations passed by the upper chamber in 2021.
We have passed the Petroleum Industry Bill, now an act, something that could not be passed for over 20 years. We passed, of course, we passed the supplementary appropriation of 2021 as well, to enable the executive, particularly this administration, fund the security agencies as well as provide some resources to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We have also passed the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria Amendment Bill, something that is going a long way to ensure that those who want to cheat the Bill of Nigeria through going through AMCON are not given that opportunity to do so.
The Senate President said as of November 2021, about 2,500 bills had been introduced in the National Assembly, 769 in the Senate, and 1,634 in the House of Representatives. Some other critical bills passed by the Senate in 2021 include the Assets Management Corporation of Nigeria AMCON Bill and the Banks and Other Financial Institutions Bofia Act. Some significant bills passed by the House of Representatives in 2021 include the Infectious Diseases Bill, Petroleum Industry Bill, Electoral Act Amendment Bill, Climate Change Bill, Armed Forces Trust Fund Bill, National Agricultural Development Fund Bill, National Assembly Library Trust Fund Bill, National Blood Service Commission Bill, and the Federal Road Authority Bill.
Despite the differences of opinions, all of us in the House of Representatives, and indeed the entire National Assembly, worked to pass the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. We included in that bill provisions we hoped will significantly enhance the conduct of our national elections and improve public confidence in our electoral outcomes. As it is now, that bill has not received presidential assent, and it falls to Parliament to decide the best way forward. We passed meaningful legislation such as the Police Service Commission Repeal and Reenactment Act. At the same time, we are taking expedited action on proposals to amend the Armed Forces Act, the Police Act, and the enabling statutes of the National Security and Civil Defense Corps and the Nigerian Customs Service. With these reforms, our intention is to address structural inadequacies of our internal security system that have left us dangerously exposed.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. On the last day of plenary in 2021, the House of Representatives passed the Infectious Diseases Bill, also known as the Quarantine Act Repeal Bill. The passage of the bill came over a year after it was widely condemned by Nigerians because of the powers given to the Director General of the NCDC and the Minister of Health. In this report, we look at the journey of the bill and the final contents as passed by the House. COVID-19 has changed the world as we know it. It's affected the global economy, led to the collapse of businesses worldwide. The lockdowns disrupted social activities and tourism. Nigeria is not left out of the devastating effects of COVID-19. Government at all levels and the private sector have offered several responses to the pandemic. For the federal legislature, enacting a law to guide the handling of pandemics was one of its responses. In the early days of the pandemic, the House of Representatives introduced a bill to repeal the 2004 Quarantine Act. The bill, which was sponsored by the Speaker of the House of Representatives and two others, sought to increase the penalty for violating the Quarantine Act and further empower the Nigeria Center for Disease Control to deal better with diseases and pandemics in the future.
COVID-19.
On the day the legislation was introduced, a lawmaker from Abia State, Representative Nkem Abonta, pleaded with his colleagues to exercise restraint, especially as the contents of the bill may infringe on the rights of Nigerians.
The urgency we need now, Mr. Speaker, is providing solution the cure of COVID-19. This bill is a long-term case, not immediate cure. On that note, I am saying that we should apply the wisdom of direction. Can we circulate even this bill, even for the reasons of crossing the T's and dotting the I's of the I have not seen it. From the paper here, it was introduced the first reading today. We're doing the second reading, the provision for the third reading, and what? The speed, in this speed, we may miss the direction and turn back again to seek direction. So I want to plead with colleagues, I want to plead with people of this motion. Can we use today to recirculate it, since we'll meet again by God's grace, by Tuesday? Then we'll look at it, then we'll be able to see. Let me know if there are provisions that offend our human rights. We've been told that there's going to be a chip. In fact, that the vaccine is here already. So when we put in the chip, the monitors from UK, from US, what we are doing in our rooms and whatever. And now, there's a portion now saying, NCDC will even have a right to order these things. That was why, Mr. Chair, you observed me shaking and wondering and perplexed.
When the bill was introduced in May 2020, it was scheduled to be passed through first, second and third reading within an hour, but was opposed by some lawmakers who questioned the powers given to the Director General of the NCDC. That position was shared by the state governors during a public hearing on the bill.
We think, at the level of governors, that this bill appears to vest overbearing discretionary powers on the Director General of the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. Anyone who has read it would know what I'm talking about. And that is without prejudice, as I said, to the role that the NCDC plays and the hard work of the current leadership. But we all know, as Democrats, that it is always dangerous to vest uncontrollable powers on any one person.
Other participants also shared their thoughts on the proposed legislation.
We will subscribe to the rejection of this provision, which allows any public officer to subjectively and arbitrarily stigmatize and conduct and conclude that any person has contracted an infectious disease.
At the end of day one of the public hearing, the contributions all seemed to suggest one thing, that the intent of the bill is good, but there must be a balance between public health and human rights. On day two, at least 50 stakeholders were invited to make presentations, including the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, and the Minister of Health. When it was the turn of the NCDC, the then Director General summed the controversial bill like this.
NCDC also thinks that the bill, as drafted, gives excessive powers to the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control.
The Minister of Health also expressed some reservations on the proposed legislation.
The prayer of the Federal Ministry of Health that this memorandum will be useful to assist the committee in considering amendments of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention Act of 2018, an amendment of the Quarantine Act of 1926 in place of this infectious disease bill of 2020. This is the position of the entire Federal Ministry of Health.
The public hearing wrapped up throwing up questions. Is it back to the drawing board for the House of Representatives, or will the bill be thrown out and a more acceptable one formulated?
Those against me say nay.
Fast forward to December 2021. During the last sitting of the year, the House of Representatives passed the controversial Infectious Diseases Bill, which many thought had been thrown out by the House following negative reactions. No word on the bill had been heard since the public hearing in June 2020, where stakeholders openly rejected the bill, describing it as draconian and plagiarized. They questioned the enormous powers given to the Director General of the NCDC and the Minister of Health, as well as a compulsory vaccination clause. Before the bill was passed, the Speaker had this to say.
Last year, like the rest of the world, Nigeria was immersed in the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, the pandemic still persists, evolving in ways that portend danger for our people here at home and all over the world. Two areas of particular concern are the issue of vaccine hesitancy and the international response to emerging variants in ways that seem to target the African continent. We have seen through years of scientific evidence that vaccines work. They have worked to combat yellow fever and measles and to end polio. At the height of the pandemic, we prayed for deliverance from the trap of this deadly disease. Vaccines are the answer to that prayer, and as leaders in our communities, we should encourage people to take advantage of the protection offered by science to prevent illness and death.
The version of the bill passed by the House removed some of the powers of the Director General of the NCDC and the Minister of Health and vested them in a task force on public health emergency to be inaugurated by the President. Some of these powers include prohibition or restriction of meetings, gatherings and public entertainments, surveillance and contact tracing measures at premises, the power to declare any premises to be a quarantine area or isolation facility, the clause on abatement of overcrowding, which empowers the DG of NCDC to direct the owner or occupier of a building to abate overcrowding or shut down the facility, has been left out. Apprehension of persons on the streets suffering from infectious diseases has also been deleted. The clause on compulsory vaccination for children at birth was also deleted. However, the task force in Clause 49 is given the power to order certain persons to undergo vaccination or other prophylaxis. Other critical clauses in the bill include declaration of a public health emergency. If the President is satisfied with the advice of the Minister of Health that there is an outbreak or imminent outbreak of an infectious disease that poses a substantial risk of fatalities, he may declare a public health emergency. The President shall inaugurate a task force to be known as Public Health Emergency Task Force. The task force shall be composed of representatives from various government ministries, departments and agencies. On Clause 8, which deals with medical examination and treatment, the task force shall require any person who is confirmed of a declared infectious disease to go into isolation for further medical care. Nigerians await the fate of the bill when it arrives the upper chamber. Now, this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.